In the entrepreneur world, we're taught how to generate more money and how to raise more revenue and all the strategies around bringing in more revenue, but hardly are we ever taught about how to keep that revenue, increase profits, and keep us safe financially as entrepreneurs. But in this episode, that's exactly what we talk about with Mel Abraham. So keep listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to a new episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today is a very special episode because this is the first time we were having someone on the podcast, back for the second time, that isn't an employee of the company. Because obviously you guys all know Matt Johnson has been on the podcast twice for some amazing conversations. But today we're having one of our external guests, Mel Abraham, back on the episode. And the reason why is Mel's story was so amazing and really pulled me in, and I thought was such a great story for you guys to hear, because it really represented what entrepreneurship is and really showed an amazing journey that we didn't even really get an opportunity to talk about the tactical stuff. And I want to dedicate this entire episode to talking about the tactical stuff, talk about wealth generation, financial things, because as an entrepreneur, we're taught how to make the money, but we're not really taught what we should do with the money. How do we keep the money? How do we let the money grow for us? And so it is my honor to have Mr. Mel Abraham back on the podcast. Mel, welcome.
Hey, Brandon, it's good to be back.
Yeah, I'm excited. So let's just start off by giving the promise of what people are going to learn on this episode. So in a nutshell, what is it that you actually do that we're going to talk about today?
So the reality is that what I'm looking for, what I'm obsessed with, is helping people understand how do they get affluence in their life. And I use the term affluence intentionally because we can say wealth, we can say all kinds of other things, but affluence to me is more of a holistic view of life. Affluence could be a yacht in Monaco or a tent in Montana. It depends on what you want, Right. So affluence and financial liberation. And again, I choose the term liberation very specifically instead of financial freedom, because It's easy to look at someone and say, oh, they got a lot of money. They got a lot of commas after their in their bank account. The fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter how much money you have. There's a lot of people I know that are extremely successful. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They have a miserable relationship. They got miserable health, and they don't enjoy the days of their lives. And so what they are is imprisoned by the money. They're not free. And so, great, I'm imprisoned by the money. I can decorate my prison cell, but it's still a prison cell.
And what do you mean by prison? Is it because I can look at someone, let's just say they have $100 million in the bank. How would that $100 million be a prison to someone that has that kind of money?
There's so many people that, there's a handful of people that are very close to me that I know that have that kind of money, but they just don't live a good life. As they have stuff, but they don't have great relationships. Their health is failing. They're angry all the time. And to me, what's happening is that the only time that they feel like they're on task is when they're in a conquest, when they're in a journey, when they're chasing for that almighty dollar. And to me, what's happening is they're being driven by the money. And to me, that's imprisonment, because money is a result. It's not a purpose.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And so they're focusing really heavily on the generation part of the money, but nothing else, correct?
Yeah. They're focusing solely on the scorecard. And I mean, and I've known you for long enough now that we do focus on the scorecard, but we actually judge our success based upon our relationships, our experiences in life, the things that we get a chance to do and share with each other. I mean, we've been on trips together and that type of thing, and with our loved ones and the people around us. That's why I say that wealth is a statistic, and richness is an experience and a feeling. And what we really want is richness and not wealth in life.
Yeah. And I love that. And I believe that to the core of my being, like you just mentioned. And I think that, it's very easy to get caught up in that generation side of it, especially with all the talk that goes on inside of the space of, and really it is, because also businesses need to generate revenue in order to be around, to succeed, to grow, So it's very easy to get stuck in that trap. If we get stuck in there, what sort of problems start to arise? And let's take experiences out of the equation. Let's take all of that other stuff like love and relationships. But what financial risks are people at if they focus a lot of their attention just on generate all the time?
So there's two aspects of an entrepreneur's life. And the first aspect is income generation. Mm-hmm. And this is where we start most of the time. We spend our time figuring out how we're going to do our launches, how are we going to build our business, how are we going to increase revenue, how are we going to do that. Now, the first mistake that they make is they get caught up at the top line. In other words, they're focused on revenues only. And they do what I refer to as marketers math. They do a launch and they say it's $1 million launch, but the real question isn't how much revenue you generated in the launch. The real question is how much you kept from the launch. How much of that ended up in your pocket and in your accounts and your investments and that, because that leads to the second element that most entrepreneurs will actually forget about because they get so caught up in the income generation, and that's wealth creation. So we need to find a balance between income generation and wealth creation in order to truly build that affluent life. And our business can be and typically is the most powerful wealth building tool that we have. But at the same time, if it's the only wealth building tool we have, it becomes also the single point of failure for us if we're not careful.
Yeah, that makes a whole bunch of sense. So what's the difference between wealth and income?
So income is what we generate through the work that we do.
Yep.
Okay. At least that's the way I term it when I work with folks. So whether it's services, whether it's products, whether it's consulting, those kinds of things, we're going to generate income from that. Wealth is creating income that is what I call leveraged income. It's income that is driven by an asset or a portfolio outside of your active role, outside of the necessity for you to show up and continually run the treadmill, turn the dials, and move the levers. So your business will generate the income. You take the income and use that, a portion of the income, and use that income to build a pool of assets outside your business. So now if you choose to walk away from the business, and I'm actually in the middle of a negotiation right now for two young guys to walk away from their business and everything, but they're going to have an asset pool that will allow them to continue to live their life. That's where we find liberation.
I love that. And it's so important. And especially like as a new entrepreneur or someone who's thinking about getting into entrepreneurship or starting a business, this is the stuff that generally isn't talked about or isn't taught. And my story, Mel, I've gotten into trouble because of this, like there are times where we did $500,000, I think it was in 2017 revenue, and I was $40,000 in debt because my one and only source of income, my family's livelihood, literally came from the business and selling courses and all of that stuff. Anything happened to that, which it did, then whoosh, everything's gone. Like I didn't even have anything really in savings at all because it was just like in one door and out the other. And it was like, I got really good at generating money, but was not good at keeping the money. It's like I was very good at attracting the money, but not very good at like letting the money work for me. And we hear Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank all the time talk about his money's little soldiers who go out and collect more soldiers, and he doesn't want to send them out to die. And that's what I was doing, was sending out all my little soldiers to die. And so
I use a similar analogy. Yeah.
And then that's what I think is what's so important about what you do, because there's literally, at least no one that I know of that actually talks about this. And I know you have a process that you like to bring people through to help them start to put all of these things into practice. And my first question is, before we dig into the details of it and what people need to do and different areas that they need to focus on and stuff like that, is what is a revenue level that someone needs to be at in order to really take all of this stuff into consideration? Is it any revenue level? Is there different things for different levels? Or, I mean, like, how relevant is this to people who might be in different stages of their journey?
I think it's the strategies and the principles are relevant at all levels. What you'll employ, depending on where you're at, may shift and change depending on the level. So, for instance, if someone has a lot of consumer debt, let's say someone went to college, they decide to get student loans to go to college, they're sitting on $100,000 in student loan debt. They decide they're not going to use their degree, they're going to start their business, and they want to run their business. One of the first things that I want to do with that person is give them a plan to get them out of that debt that's going to choke them, and say, how do we get you out of the debt while at the same time building these investments? So because that debt will be an albatross around their neck for a long time.
Right.
You may have another person that has zero debt. They don't have student loan debt. They're building their business. Now we're looking at it and saying, in this case, what we need to do is scale your income, scale your profits in a way that we can carve and slice the profits off to allow us to now start building the machine outside the business. There's 5 different incomes, and I don't recall if we did this on the first episode, but there's 5 incomes that I think we as entrepreneurs can kind of move through. And as entrepreneurs, we may actually have all 5 potentially at any given time, but by and large, when we first start out, we start in the bottom stage. And this kind of speaks to this whole idea of, you'll hear people say, what I want is passive income.
Right.
So I don't believe in the whole thing of passive income, because here's what I do know from years and years and decades of working with people and my own financial journey, which clearly wasn't a straight line.
Yeah.
So, is that passive insinuates that we can set it and forget it.
Right.
And the problem is that what I do know is that when you forget about your income and you forget about your wealth, it will forget about you.
Yep. And
so what we need to realize is that we want to look for leveraged income. In other words, when we first start out, if I'm doing when I first started out as a CPA, I was doing one-on-one, basically consulting. So that's a one-to-one relationship. For every hour I sell, I get $1 or $10 or $100 or $500. What we want to do is leverage our time back. In other words, I want to create something where the income isn't driven by my time dedicated to driving that income.
Right.
When we first start out, we're at the active level. That's level 1. And that is where we start out. It's typically one-on-one. It's solopreneurs. It's employees. It's a direct relationship. And we all, in one way or another, start there. You started there. I started there. And then we start to realize there's only so much I can do to raise my fees or anything. I'm going to max out on the hours in a day. I'm going to max out on my energy, going to max out on the days a week, and I'm going to max out. I can't continue to run at that pace. And so we start to go from active to second level, which is business.
Right.
And that's when we start to build teams. When your business really started to take off is, you brought team in, you brought an integrator in, Taylor, that just completely helped transform the trajectory of the business. And then Matt and all of that. So at business, we start to have the ability to leverage some of our time back, and the business isn't as dependent on us as it once was, but it still depends on us. So It's a little more leveraged.
Yeah.
But the next 3 is where things start to really, really start to move forward. And that is, the next level of income is what I call asset-based income. And that's when we take the business and we use the business, the profits or some of the profits of the business, to buy assets, things like real estate. And you and I have a very close friend who's been on a complete mission since the beginning of the year, buying real estate to build an income stream for renting the real estate. So now He's earning money in his business, but he also has these assets that he's going to collect rent from that don't require as much time. He may have to rent it, but he's got a manager, so he's not going to need to do that.
Right.
He may have repairs, but he's got a manager that can do that. So we've leveraged it up. That's level 3.
Okay.
And at some point, we want to start acquiring these other assets. Level 4 is a little more leveraged, and that's what we call residual income.
Mm-hmm.
This is what happens. And this was the thing that happened with me is I started to look at it and say, if I'm trading hours for dollars, how do I take that? If I'm selling, felt tip pens, I can put a bunch of felt tip pens on a shelf, and then I can sell them over time. But if I'm selling hours, once this hour's gone, and if I didn't sell it, it's gone forever.
Right.
So the question is, how do I leverage my knowledge, my wisdom, in a way that I can think once and then sell it over and over and over again? And with technology today, it's much easier. So things like books, things like courses, your intellectual property that you get to license, those kinds of things that you can create and get revenue off. Every time I sell a book, Amazon sells a book, I sell a book, I get a residual from it. Right. I created it once. I'm not doing anything for it anymore. So we can do that. People in network marketing will experience this. If they have a big downline, they'll get residual income without doing as much work.
I have a buddy who was in credit card processing.
Yeah.
And same thing. He's like, dude, I haven't worked in that business for 10 years, but I get a check every single month because of the accounts that he signed up, and they just give you a percentage of whatever they're doing. It's beautiful. And
it's a beautiful thing. Residuals are a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So, and then the fifth income is portfolio income. Mm-hmm. This is what people typically think about when it comes to investing. It's stocks, bonds, it's real estate investment trusts, ETFs, index funds, annuities, those kinds of things. They're paper assets that you invest in that will either pay you a dividend over time, or they'll grow over time that you could sell and make money on. So that combination of those 5 incomes will accumulate to 100% of your ability to earn. Mm. What I want people to do over time is to be able to pay for their desired lifestyle with all the income from the top 3 and none of the income from the bottom 2.
Top 3 being the assets, residual, and portfolio?
Yes.
Love that.
Because what that tells me is, and this is exactly what happened when I got diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
When I got diagnosed with cancer, I removed my active role in the active business and my business stuff in the bottom 2. And I said, I can't spend my time there. I need to focus on healing. And I told my wealth guy, I said, listen, Mitch, turn the machine on. So I started drawing the rents from the properties. I started drawing the residuals, and I started drawing the dividends. That amount that I was drawing was enough to support our lifestyle. So I didn't have to sell things. I didn't have to cash things out. I didn't have to spend down my savings. I didn't have to do it. I didn't have to sell my wife's shoes. She would have killed me if I did that. So I didn't have to do any of that. And the most important part of that is it was the cash from the machine that I was living off of, that we were living off of. It wasn't the machine itself. See, the mistake is that we save money, and when we need it, we think that we're just going to spend it. And now we get down to zero and we got to rebuild the machine.
Right.
If we do it right and we build it the right way and large enough, the machine never goes away. So I didn't change my machine. My machine is still there. And that's what I want for everyone is to have that ability. I work because I choose to work. I work because I love what I do. I do the things that I do because I want to serve and I want to make a difference in people's lives. And when I choose to not do it, I can do it as much or as little as I want, because I know that 100% of my lifestyle and beyond is taken care of by the machine, the top 3 incomes.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. And I know as people are listening, they're self-identified. There's probably two different things going on. So we'll go through both of them. But number one, I can already see people going, well, I don't need to do this all on my own. I can hire a financial planner. I can hire someone to do this. But to me, that, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before we recorded, is actually a big problem, Because correct me if I'm wrong, but if you go to a financial planner, they're likely going to be investing off of their values and the way their lifestyle is, not necessarily yours, right? Like, are there problems with people not taking the reins and responsibility of doing this themselves and just giving it to somebody else?
Yeah, so there is, and so I consider myself a financial educator and not a financial advisor unless I have a one-on-one relationship with the person. And the
Right.
fact is that I don't sell any investments, so I have no bias whatsoever, other than the bias to make sure that you are taken care of, that you
Right.
have the life that you want. So I get a chance to say the things that I want to say, and sometimes I irritate financial planners.
That doesn't sound like Mel.
So here's the thing. There's a couple things that I think are challenging, and this is the financial services industry wants to keep it complicated, in my opinion, because if they keep it complicated, they keep us beholden to them. And it doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't need to be complicated. So what I think we need to do is realize that our role as the entrepreneur is to always stand at the helm of your financial ship, to always be the one that's the captain of your financial ship. And when I bring on an advisor, just like my advisor, they are my navigator. They are my first mate. They are an advisor, but they are not in control. And the mistake that we make is that instead of delegating some of the things to our advisors, we relinquish them and we give them to them and say, you handle it. I'm not good with numbers, or it's too complicated. You handle it. And a lot of them are trained to handle things when the market's going up, and they have no clue what to do when the market's going down, or an uncertainty. That's one. Two, the thing that I think is important when we start to talk about financial advising and some of that stuff is that they are building something to your vision, not their vision, not and it's not judging. Some people, like I say, it doesn't matter to me if your vision is to live on a yacht in Monaco or a tent in Montana. The question is it your vision? It's not the vision of your neighbors. It's not what the media says. It's not what social media says. It doesn't matter as long as it's not harmful, immoral, or illegal. You get to live your life your way. And too often, we don't set a trajectory for our financial future based upon the vision that we want for our lives. When I first start working with people, we do something called the affluence visioning process. And that's one of the things we do is say, let's define your life. Let's figure out where you want to go. And then it's a matter of creating a plan to get you there.
Right.
But if we don't define it first and see what it looks like, we can't price it second to figure out what it's going to cost us.
Yeah.
And so what I think we need to do is realize that I need a financial advisor that, one, will remove all bias. And so there are those that are brokers that are biased by commissions, transaction fees, and transactions themselves. There are those that are planners that are not executors. I need a combination of both, but I need someone that is independent, objective, and will put my best interest first. Typically, we call them a fiduciary because they'll put your best interest at the top of the list, even if it costs them money. Right. Second, they need to be willing to understand and embrace the vision, the financial vision you have for your life.
Right.
And third, they need to be willing to create the plan to get you there.
Gotcha. And there are people that are able to do that, right?
There are people that are able to. There are a lot of people that are able to do that. Do they practice that way? Not all the time. And one of the reasons for that is if they're in a captive environment, they have a narrow set of investments that they can present to you. So they will use what they have in their toolbox and say, here's what I got. Right. Versus if we get someone that's truly independent, they have the gamut of investments. My investment advisor isn't captive to, say, when Wachovia was around, because this is what happened to me, is that I had an advisor at Wachovia, and Wachovia, they sold me Wachovia investments. And I thought I was getting the best investment for me, but I was getting the best investment for me that Wachovia had. And the difference is this: there's two standards. There is the best interest of the client standard, basically the fiduciary standard, which is where you want them to play. And then there's the suitability standard. Was it a suitable investment for me? Yeah, it was suitable. Was it the best investment for me? No, it wasn't. I want the best investment for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, but I think to kind of wrap up that first part is that even if you can find those right people, it's still your responsibility to, one, find them, recognize them if they have all those things. But I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of this that people can probably do on their own too, right? Like, I would imagine you could probably do all of it on your own.
You can do most of it on your own. There are certain investments that you can't get access to without an intermediary or an advisor in between to get you access to them. But by and large, you can do it on your own. Here's the caveat: don't invest in anything you don't understand.
Yeah, 100%.
So if you want to invest in stocks, understand the stock market, understand that. Now, the right investment advisor will have the heart of an educator, heart of a teacher, and be willing to have the patience to explain to you and get you to understand. And if that takes an hour or it takes 10 minutes, they understand that that's important. If they don't have the patience and they talk down to you, they're the wrong advisor. I don't care how good they are.
Yeah.
If you're supposed to make an informed decision, their job is to help educate you in that decision and in that process.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And so that leads me to the second thing, which is, I know that people listening did this. When you went through the 5 levels, everyone was self-identifying what level they're at. Because I know that's what I did. I'm like, okay, got level 1. Got level 2. Okay, level 3. Okay, yeah, all right. So when people self-recognize that they're maybe not at all 5 levels, where do we start? I know you have your process and your methodology called the affluence blueprint. Would the blueprint help them start to put all of these pieces together?
Yeah, it would. But I think, where do you start? You actually just start where you're at, and it sounds flippant, but here's the thing. We talked about 5 incomes.
Yep.
I don't expect you to all go out there and go, I'm going to get 5 incomes, because here's what we need to do. If my active income isn't running profitably right now, I got to get all wheels under that train first.
Yeah.
This is why it becomes important to integrate the workings of your business, your entrepreneurial endeavor, with the workings of your financial life. So I need to make sure that I have an optimized, if you will, business that's running. So I can then use that optimized business to then start saying, all right, I'm going to go after one of the other top 3 incomes. I'm going to turn around and either look at assets or residual or portfolio. Now, notice what I'm saying. I'm saying that you're going to go after one. I don't recommend that you go after all, because if it's new to you, remember we say we don't invest in anything we don't understand. If it's new to you, trying to understand all of them at the same time doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Now, does it matter which one you start with? Not really. What matters is, and let's just, we'll talk about our friend James.
Yeah.
He loves real estate.
Yeah.
And he's willing to invest the time to understand the real estate, invest the time to do some work on the houses, invest the time to be the landlord and the manager for a little while until he gets a manager in place, and do all of that.
Yeah.
Me, on the other hand, I don't want the call saying, hey, the toilet's clogged. So I didn't choose real estate as my first entry into the leveraged levels of income. He did. Neither's right nor wrong. Just one is right for your personality type. You might sit back and go, I love real estate. I want to play in real estate. Great.
Yeah.
Then we look at real estate as the vehicle for you to start. And then from that real estate, we'll go into the other incomes, if you will.
Okay, great. So that makes a lot of sense. As you start to move up the ladder, you just kind of pick the one that fits what you want and what that vision is. Now, going back to someone who's just starting out, they might feel like they don't have a lot of money to invest and get into these different levels of income. You have 3 phases. So you have generate, accumulate, and insulate, correct?
Yes.
And that makes up the affluence blueprint. So if I heard you correctly, you're basically saying the first step really is to make sure that you nail the generate stage, which is like getting the business up and running, make sure the money's coming in, make sure that you're like streamlining that. Is that correct? Because without the generate phase, you're not going to be able to accumulate or insulate or get through these different levels of income, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If we're not generating effectively, there's nothing that's going to accumulate, which means we have nothing to insulate. So, I mean, that's the reality. So in the generate phase, what we first want to do is we want to build a solid foundation. We want to understand where our money is coming and going. And sometimes this is a painful phase because we're starting to look at income and expenses and wants and needs and things of that nature.
Yeah.
We then, the next piece of that is to understand how do we create income elevation? In other words, there are little nuances, little things that we can do to scale our income. I talk about 8 revenue scalers. And so you have the ability to sit back and say, for instance, let's just take my live event. I did a live virtual event in April.
Yep.
Recorded the event. I did that event once. I made money from the event once.
Yep.
But now I've taken the recordings and productized them.
Yeah.
And made a residual stream from the product that we sell. So if we look at the numbers, what we're really looking at is saying, what are the things that I'm doing that I can actually ratchet and get more, I can get more value out of it, more income out of it. And that's what I call the income elevation piece, where we're dealing with how am I elevating that income? Because here's what I know is if you look at the math, $200 extra a month that you put into an investment account at 8%, $200 a month at 8%, $50 a week.
Yep.
Okay. So you're talking about $2,400 a year will accumulate to over $300,000 in 30 years.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
So if all I do is get a little bit of income elevation and put that into an investment account properly, over time, I can easily build $500,000, $1 million in a portfolio. And so we need that income elevation. And then the third piece of this is to really understand what I call the essential evaluation is that if we're not checking the pulse on the patient, if we don't know the key metrics or the key numbers to just watch over, we don't know that we're on the right path.
Right.
We got to check the compass on the journey when we do that. Now, I may be overboard because I check my numbers, almost weekly. Right. But even if you just do it monthly, to know here's where I am, here's where I'm trying to go, here's how much we've moved towards that. Are there any differences or changes that we need to make?
Right.
Those are they're the 3 major pieces of that generate piece. If we can get a good foundation, elevate the income, and make sure that we're monitoring it on a regular basis with the right metrics, now we've got this thing dialed in.
Okay, great. So that's like generate. We want to get all of those things in order, and then we can start to move up to accumulate. And if I'm hearing you correctly, in the generation phase, even if you have an extra $100, $200 a month, you can already start to move up. I mean, you still probably want to make sure the generation is happening and it's more streamlined and you're kind of like maximizing it. But once people get the generation part of it going and they start to have some extra money, things like that, what do we do? What do we do to move into that accumulate phase, and what does that look like?
So in the accumulate phase, this is when we start to look at investments and other investments. The first thing that we need to do is you're not going to get into many investments when you right away when you're just putting $200 a month away.
Right. Okay.
So one of the things that I tell people to do is let's just accumulate that $200 a month or $300 a month, whatever it is, into what I call a high yield cash account. Okay. Now, it sounds really sexy, but most savings accounts today will earn you like 0.1, 0.2%. And at one point, these high yield cash accounts would earn you 1.5, 1.3, but they're down about at 0.7%.
Yeah.
So it's a little more, not a lot more, although it's 3 or 4 times what you'd get in a savings account.
Right.
Here's the key. I'm just trying to get you a little bit of earnings.
Right.
So we do that because what I want to do is I want to accumulate my money in a liquid account, meaning that I can draw it out any day of the week, anytime I want, without penalties or without a waiting period.
Right.
That's one thing. That the other thing that I want in a high yield cash account is that it is insured. This is our conservative money. We do not want it at risk. So we want to make sure that it's insured. And most banks, credit unions all have either FDIC or deposit insurance up to certain limits. So we want to make sure it's insured.
Yeah.
And then the third piece of that is making sure that the high yield cash account has no fees. Yeah. So we're not going to erode our accumulation account with stupid bank fees. A lot of my banking, quite frankly, I use local credit unions. Their fee structures are low, if at all. They are more community based, and I find that for the most part they have every kind of service that I possibly would need. And so pretty much most of my accounts are there. My investment broker accounts are somewhere else. Yeah. But why I do this is that, let's say that over time you accumulate $5,000 in a high yield cash account. Now you sit back and go, all right, I want to go put this into the stock market. I want to put it into an ETF, an exchange traded fund or something. Now you can move that to a brokerage house and make the investment.
Got it. Okay.
But I want to have that high yield cash account because I want to hide my money away, so I'm not enticed to spend it. I want it out of my operating account, and I want it automatic. So if I make the commitment that we're going to transfer $300 a month every time that first of the month comes by, automatically $300 goes into the high yield cash account without me doing a thing.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think it was even Tony Robbins or I don't know, someone that just said, if you have the money, you'll spend it. So you have to set up those automated type of things. And we did that for my son, Will. It's just in a normal savings account for him. It was like $50 a month. And I literally forgot about it. Like I don't even notice it, being pulled out of the account, and completely forgot about it. And Jacqueline, my wife, was looking at a statement the other day, and I was like, I don't recognize that account. What is that? There's like $5,000 in there. And she goes, oh, that's Will's account. I'm like, wait, Will, my 7-year-old, has $5,000 in a checking account? She's like, yeah, we set up the automated thing. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot about that. But now we were accumulating that. So now we could technically take that money for him and put it somewhere else where we can start to earn more on it now. And if I understand correctly, that's accumulate is getting to the point where you have that money to now insulate. Is that?
No, well, not really. Now to invest. This is where we're building the machine.
So investment is still under the accumulate phase?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is where the first piece is, depending on where you want to put your money, you want to get educated.
Right.
So if it's real estate, if it's stocks, if it's ETFs, index funds, you want to get involved and get educated. And I know that some people don't. Yeah. I just want someone else to do it for me.
Yeah.
Well, this is your future. This is your legacy. This is your family. This is your grandkids. This is the people you love. This is the causes that you support.
Right.
And we're not going to delegate that.
Well, and then you have no idea if the person's doing a great job, if they know what they're talking about, if they're if you're just so ignorant to all of it, then you have no awareness of how well they're doing or what's going on. Or I would imagine this is probably when people start getting scammed and stuff like that too. You're more susceptible to that type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's just like anything in life. If you want it to work for you, you need to put into work to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now with that education, you then go and say, all right, now I want to look at asset allocation. Now I want to buy assets, whether it's real estate or different stocks or if I'm young, like Will is young, really young.
Yeah.
So you could put him in an aggressive portfolio and let that puppy ride,
right?
Versus me, I'm 59 this year, and I don't want an aggressive portfolio, because if there is a market downturn, and there will be, because that's just the way it is, there's cycles.
Yeah.
I'm much closer to the age where I want to start turning that machine on, and I don't want that machine to shrink because of volatility in the market.
Right.
So age-wise, that could impact how you invest it, that asset allocation, the diversification that you use to make that happen. But then the automation. So if we have the education, we want the allocation, and then we want the education to really start to allow this thing to run on its own.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And that's all under accumulate phase.
Yes.
Okay, great. So what does the evolution look like from accumulate to insulate? And what does insulate actually mean?
So insulate is how do you go from exposed to protected? Look,
okay.
we live in a litigious society. We live in a world of volatility and uncertainty right now.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is say, and the more successful that you are, unfortunately, the bigger the target is on your back.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's a frivolous claim or not, you still have to defend the claim. So how do we protect your assets from being taken in a lawsuit or being lost because of market volatility? And we can't completely eliminate market volatility, but we can reduce it and mitigate it. How do we eliminate and insulate you from saying, I'm building this machine, I don't want it taken away from me?
Right.
And too often we don't think about that. Taxes. How do we make sure that we minimize our taxes? Because like it or not, y'all in business, y'all have a partner, and that partner is the government.
This is the thing. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. This is my biggest issue. This is why I've had such a hard time finding a good CPA, is that I feel like most of them view their job as just to file your taxes, but not to help you reduce your taxes. Like, I feel like most of them just show up and is like, okay, here, cool. I got your books. I'm just going to file them real quick. And it's like, no. I want you to just like show me, what does my corporation structure look like? What should I be writing off? Do I need to spend more money here? Like, what am I not seeing? But it seems like there's not too many of them out there that do that. And especially not too many that do it in our space that understand what's actually going on.
Yeah. Wow. This is certainly a can of worms. Most accountants, and me being one of them, I have the right to, I've earned the right to say this.
Yeah.
Most of the accountants are horrible at doing this type of stuff because they've been trained as a scribe of the past. They simply want to say, give me what you did in the past. I'll do the tax return. So they're complying with the tax code.
Yeah.
But here's the challenge. I want an accountant that's going to look out the front window and say, wait, this is where you're going? Let's look at some things and make some decisions that can legally minimize the tax bite. That makes sense. Whether it's we're going to put you into LLC, or we're going to convert the LLC to be taxed as an S corporation and pay you salary, or we're going to put certain retirement plans in so we can keep the lion's share of our profits to be used for our machine and our future and our financial future and our kids. And a lot of them they're not that way. And so what I think we need to do is, when we have this conversation with them, when you're interviewing a CPA, is to really understand, how do they work? Because most of them, they work on whatever's the fire deadline that is on them at the time, the tax filing deadline or whatever.
Yeah.
But I want someone that's proactive. I want someone that's going to sit back and say, hey, we're about 8 months in. How are you doing on your business? Let's take a look at those things. Let's see what we can start getting into place to try to minimize it. Are there things that you're going to be doing in the coming year that we can accelerate in this year? Or like right now, the CPA should be having a conversation with you saying, hey, if this goes the way it might go, and this is not about politics whatsoever, but Biden becomes president, and the Republicans don't keep control of the Senate, there's a new tax bill coming in.
Right.
And that tax bill is going to impact corporations. That tax bill is going to impact the states. That tax bill is going to impact real estate investors. It's going to impact investors in general. I know that because I've been reviewing it.
Right. Yep.
And in California, for instance, conceivably, you could pay as high as 60% in tax.
It's insane. It's
insane.
So nuts.
So what should we be doing if this, and we're not going to make decisions today because we don't know if it'll ever go through, but we ought to be having the conversations and say, hey, be aware and be prepared to make changes and moves as we need to versus being reactive. And it's a problem. It really is in the profession.
Yeah. It is. And that's been, I think I've gone through at least 3 CPAs in the last 2 to 3 years. And I think we finally have one that is on the ball. Like, this is the first time I've ever had a CPA that sent me a message in October and was like, we should probably like schedule a meeting, seeing what you're looking like this year. And what do we need to do like the last 3 months to, or the last couple months to get things in order and all of that stuff. So yeah.
I like hearing that.
Yeah. I know. I'm really excited. So we'll see how that meeting goes. But yeah, that's been my pet peeve with CPAs and all of that stuff. It's hard to find a good one. I mean, it really is. And so,
and you mentioned something that I think is really important, is that there's a lot of them that don't get this online space. They don't get the digital space.
Yeah.
And it's different. And with the whole intercommerce and sales tax, there's a lot of nuances. And so they need to really understand that to be really effective for you.
Right. Yeah. 100%. I agree. So when it comes to insulate, what are some different ways that we can do that? Look at it. I mean, how do we know we are insulating?
So there's three primary ways to do this.
Okay.
But the first thing is to really understand where the risks can come from. So things like employees, family members. If all of a sudden Will starts to get to driving age, that creates a risk for all your assets.
Right.
And so we need to make sure that we protect those assets, not from Will, but from Will may just, things happen.
Right.
And so being aware of where those risks might come from is the first thing. And then you start to look at it and go, okay, great. Because what I call, there's the dirty dozen dream killers, I call them, but that can come into play with impacting us. Now, there's 3 ways that we can do this. The first is to use entity structuring.
Okay.
Meaning that we start to separate our assets in buckets, in LLCs, in corporations. So they're not in one bucket. Because if you think about all my assets are in an aquarium and the aquarium gets toxic, then all the assets get infected.
Yeah.
But if I take my stocks and put them in a different aquarium and I have my real estate in an aquarium and someone gets hurt there, that doesn't necessarily, if I do it right, it doesn't necessarily affect the other asset.
So an example of this be something like, okay, we have our brand. So we have the Brandon Lucero brand. Let's just call it the Brandon Lucero LLC. And then the Brandon Lucero LLC wants to buy an office space. Instead of the Brandon Lucero brand going and buying the office space and owning the office space, we would set up BL LLC that buys the office space, and the Brandon Lucero brand would rent from the BL LLC. And so essentially I own both of them, but if someone comes into the office and gets hurt, only one company is potentially at risk. Is that kind of like what you're talking about?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And just so everyone's aware, every state and every country has its own set of rules around that, but effectively what you're doing is putting a wall up between the different categories of assets.
Gotcha. Okay. Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
All right. So
the first way is to eliminate the risk altogether.
Yep.
Is if I see that there's a risk, like when we do live events, when we're allowed to see each other in person again, and we do live events, one of the things that I do at my live events, or when I'm at a friend's live event, I'll walk the space and look for things like trip hazards or problems or things like that, because now I have people in the space. And I don't want to have an issue where someone slips and falls. And I've had hotel staff get underneath the risers of the stage and C-clamp them because they moved. And I said, we're going to have women speakers up on stage. They're going to be in heels, and that gap's open and their heel gets stuck and they fall. Now, you could call me Eeyore or what,
Right.
but I'm going to anticipate and solve a problem before it ever becomes real.
Right. Makes a lot of
So
sense.
the first is eliminate. The second is the entity structuring. The third is to insure it away. So, and I'm not, just call a spade. I'm not a fan of the insurance industry because the insurance industry is in the business of what? Collecting the premiums.
Right. Yep.
That's their first objective.
Yep.
The second objective is to find a way to exclude themselves from having to pay out.
Yeah.
And then when all else fails, the third objective is they'll pay the claim.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a happy camper about the insurance industry. However, we need them when we need them. So like event insurance, liability insurance, those kinds of things, identity theft insurance. Especially entrepreneurs like yourself.
Yeah.
When I look at someone like you are active, you're mountain biking, you're running, you're surfing, you're windsurfing, you're doing all these things.
Yeah. Life insurance is where I'm assuming you're going.
No, I'm actually not.
Because
here's the thing: you've got a much higher likelihood of being disabled than you do dying, and so your ability to earn then becomes impaired if you're not able to get on camera. And this actually happened to me twice in my career. Once I herniated 3 discs in my back and literally couldn't walk. And the other time was my bike accident. Flipped a bike at 30 miles an hour because of a stupid shoelace getting caught in the sprocket.
Oh my gosh.
And I came down on my head, grade 4 concussion. I could barely speak. I was stuttering and I had no feeling on the right side.
Whoa.
And it took me 8 months to get myself back again. Now I'm a guy who makes a living speaking, and it's not really good when you're stuttering and that type of thing. And I'm physically active. I have a disability policy that literally wrote me a check well into the 6 figures to allow me to focus on my rehabilitation.
Wow.
So we want to ensure what we create, but we also want to ensure our ability to create it. And so I'm a believer in the right types of disability policies to cover us. God forbid we find ourselves in a situation that hopefully isn't permanent, that doesn't allow us to generate the income that we want.
Okay.
And then we can do the life insurance, but the life insurance really is about income replacement for the people that survive us. So for Jacqueline and the kids and all that, if they're used to living on $100,000 a year and God forbid something happens to Brandon, how do we give them that $100,000 a year to allow them to live? And so we put a policy in place. If you don't have the assets, we put a policy in place to fund their lifestyle moving forward. If you have the assets, like in my case, life insurance isn't as big of a deal. We will use the life insurance for estate tax purposes and everything because the machine is already there to pay for things. But I do believe that there's a place for life insurance, but more importantly, disability insurance. But if we go to life insurance, it's term insurance and that's it.
Yeah.
There's too many insurances out there where they say, well, you can we'll invest money for you. I believe that you'll do better than paying a lot of fees to an insurance company to invest the money and get a really crappy return. If you're buying insurance, you buy the insurance only and you invest the difference.
Yeah. I love that perspective. It makes so much sense. So I didn't know there was like a disability insurance in case you get disabled or something. That's interesting.
There's 2 kinds. Well, there's a couple of kinds you can do. It's kind of what they call salary continuation. Mm-hmm. So it'll replace your income. There's also basically an overhead policy. So you can get one that potentially replaces your income, but you can also get one that if you're disabled, that will pay the expenses of the business too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Very cool. I love that. Okay, Mel, so all of this makes so much sense. We want to generate, accumulate, insulate. That basically protects us as entrepreneurs. I mean, just anyone really, but especially as entrepreneurs, because no one's going to take care of that stuff for us. Like the company's not going to give us, we don't have a company that gives us 401k. We don't have retirement plans. Like we have to do all of that ourselves. So if someone wants to start this journey, start to learn how to do it themselves, where can they go to get more information on how to set all of this stuff up?
They can go to my website,
Okay.
melabraham.com. You'll see information about the Affluence Blueprint there. I've been putting out content. I'm going to be putting out more and more content around some of these principles and some of the things that are going on, because I think more than ever, people have realized the importance of taking control of their financial future.
Yeah.
It's no longer a situation where we can depend on the job security, that we can depend that business is going to be there. And I think that the sooner we take the helm again, the sooner that we take control, the better off we'll be. And if we don't need it, that's great. It's just like the seatbelt, I didn't need it, but I wore it anyways and I'm good. But let's do the things that we don't have to feel dependent or beholden to anyone. Yeah. So we can truly be liberated in the future and live an affluent life based on what we define it to be. Because that's what we're here to do. If I'm trying to build a business that serves a purpose, that is my calling, why am I not living my whole lifestyle as a lifestyle of calling? And that's really what I want to do.
I love all of that. And guys, I can't recommend Mel enough. I mean, if you've been an avid listener of the podcast, you know my story, you know my journey, I've been pretty good at making the money, but holding on to it, investing it, figuring out all that stuff has been quite the challenge. I mean, 2.5 years ago, we were $40,000 in credit card debt. And now my net worth is really what I'm looking at. And that has gone through the roof. I mean, everything from retirement accounts to equity in a home to looking to buy an investment property to now having things set up so that the company is safe where the revenue goes out. Like a lot of, even Mel, how to negotiate a car was learned from you. And I have to say, I think I added it up, but between the two cars that we bought in the last 2 years, I saved $37,000 off asking price when we combine the cars together because of the advice that you gave me. And it's just,
I love hearing that.
Yeah, it's amazing and it's powerful. So everyone needs to go check that out. I don't care if you're just getting started, if you're not making any money, there's always things that you could be doing, and knowing what to do when those situations come up is absolutely vital. So Mel, what's the link one more time, or where can they go one more time?
melabraham.com. You can shoot me. You can DM me on the Instagrams at melabraham9.
Cool.
And everything. I'd love whatever you do. I just want people to be able to feel like they're back in control again.
I love that. And that's why I love you. Always caring for others. So Mel, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And if anyone has not left us a review on iTunes, head over, do that now. I'd be so grateful. And thanks for tuning in to another episode. See you guys on the next one. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.